You've probably felt it. It takes advantage of your instinct for self-preservation, your need to do whatever it takes to survive. See, there's an unchangeable law specifically designed and calculated to exploit you. The world we live in schemes and crafts to place you in the center of a trap. Stay silent just for now, and maybe you can live the life that you've built up. Or if you fail to compromise, there's no escape. And it doesn't really seem like that much of a compromise anyway, because you can't really expect that the world would appreciate our devotion to the Lord. We may be a part of this world, or we may not be of this world, but we do have to find a way to live at peace with it, right? Well, let me try it this way. You look down at your lunch at work, and you see a full lunch, and it reminds you of the fact that God has recently gotten you through some really hard times. You've struggled, and God's gotten you to this place, and a part of you wants to just kind of throw open the shutters and shout and praise God, say, thank you for getting me through. But you also know that your work culture doesn't put up with religious talk. That it's not a place where you go and share your convictions and your beliefs, that your devotion doesn't have a place there. Maybe you have to sign an official diversity statement from corporate. Or maybe you just know that those who stand up for their faith just don't really move up the corporate ladder. Maybe the risk to your life is something a little different. Maybe it's the life you've built with your kids, that there's school activities, there's sports, and those things that have started to require you that you sign statements that violate the things that God says about what people are. Cancel culture, the fear of being called some kind of bigot or a phobic, has silenced the devotion that you have to Jesus. You've learned that you either toe the line or you are accused of disloyalty. Even government powers have begun to enforce these kinds of concessions. Maybe it's your certification. Maybe it's your state will oversee. If the state is overseeing what you are doing in work, they will have regulations on what you can say and can't say, the kind of conversations that are allowed. If you're giving life advice, there are certain things that we don't have conversations about. And so you've realized that oversharing can drop you into a den of lions. Your devotion to Christ could cost you your life, whether it's reputationally, whether it's your job, whether it's just having to tell your kids that, no, there's not going to be a soccer season this year, or we're not going to be able to take that trip with the school this year. Maybe you don't even know the Lord yet. Maybe you're here and you're visiting like a lot of people who have come with all of the political violence and things, and you've come back to church to kind of see what's going on here. You're wondering why these crazy Christians are willing to risk a piece of their life in order to just give expression to the devotion that they have. What happens when followers of Jesus are forced into a position where oppositional forces are against them? And there's the lure of an escape hatch that concealing our devotion to the Lord. What happens to the woman of God who cannot change the decree of this world that says that speaking about our faith in public is something that we just don't do. Daniel responded to this kind of situation. And we're going to see that his faith, his devotion to the Lord was exploited against him. And he had to make a decision. So we're going to see what Daniel's response was, what the Lord did in his life and in those around him. Can God vindicate the law in our lives, his law in our lives, when the law of our land is opposed to faithful devotion? I'm going to tell you the story today of Daniel. And we're going to read the text together. But before we do that, I want to tell you his story so I can make it as clear as I can about what's going on in that story. And then we'll come back to the text later. So you're welcome if you want to jump ahead and go to Daniel chapter 6. We're going to read through verses 1 through 28. But we'll do that in a minute after I tell you the story. So feel free to just listen along for now. But I'm going to tell you the story of Daniel from the perspective of someone who was right there in the action. Who's in charge here? Whose law has been established? I mean it. What kingdom is this? I'm sorry, I'm a little bit, this past week has been out of control. Let me take a second. I want to introduce myself. I am Darius, king of the Medo-Persian Empire. I have expanded and taken over what was the Babylonian Empire. King Nebuchadnezzar built the golden empire of Babylon. His successor has recently died, Belshazzar, and our new empire is risen in its place. I am the liberator of these people. We've brought stability, we've brought control, and even religious freedom to the land. I'm Darius. But I can't believe what's been going on this past week. Before that, we had to begin negotiations between all of the aspects of the former Babylonian Empire. There's provinces scattered all over the place. And so we were negotiating, bringing in some of their leadership, enough to encourage some cooperation, as well as some of my men who were leaders and would make sure that our leadership was enforced. And as we looked at the best and the brightest across the empire, one man became distinguished above all the others. And it was amazing because he was an exile. He had been essentially a slave, and yet he had risen to power and authority in Babylon, and he continued to be a leader through multiple kings. He was a chief advisor. He was a governor. He oversaw the empire. He even prophesied of amazing events to the day. I had to meet this Daniel. Well, and man, the stories that Daniel would tell, I listened to them as often as I could. I was especially intrigued by that story that he told about the men in the furnace. But for now, we had an empire to build. And so I set up our government. We had governors who would report directly to me, overseeing 120 satraps that I was pleased to establish. These men would go throughout the empire from every corner and making sure that each one of my provinces would have my interests being met. They would collect taxes. They would impose my rule. They would put down rebellion. And so we had these men forming. And as we were integrating our leadership together, men were meeting in the court, and I saw Daniel. Daniel was quiet. He's getting up there in age now. It's amazing, this 81-year-old man. He would walk amongst the people. He'd put his hand on this governor. He would whisper into the ear of that councilman. There were handshakes and nods. He was forming unity. He was smoothing over disunity and conflict. Daniel was quite the leader. And our plans were starting to come together. We realized that it was going to be time to send the satraps out. And so I was a little surprised when my two governors came. See, I had let slip a couple times that Daniel might need to oversee these guys a little bit. I might have to put him as chief governor over the others so that he would oversee the entire realm. Well, that snapped our leadership into, they began to work. They began to check into our law. The law of the Medes and the Persians, that is higher, greater than any. Even my own verbal decrees are subject to the law of the Medes and the Persians. And so these guys would begin to challenge and question and ask Daniel about the law. And it seemed like he was an expert already. Daniel he knew what he was talking about, but he was also free from any fault or guilt. They kept asking him and pressing him, trying to see if there was any cracks. And I figured that was a good idea, because if I wanted him to oversee the entire realm, we needed to make sure this guy is who he said he was. And what was amazing to me is that he was so faithful to his God that it gave me confidence he would be faithful to me and to our laws. I could see that that was the quality of man that he was. And so I had no problem grilling him. And it seemed that at every turn, he was above reproach. I thought we were all kind of on the same page, which is why I was sort of surprised when my two other governors came bursting into the room. They were flanked by a contingent of satraps eagerly looking to see what would happen. And so I readied myself. What is the new thing happening? What is the crisis that's happening in my kingdom? Well, the men came and the governors came and they right up to me. And the courtly decorum is wonderful. "Oh, King, live forever." You've got to love how the respectfulness that they have for their king. "Oh, King, live forever. All of your governors, all of your satraps, all of your advisors, all of your leaders have agreed, and we think that you should put a statute, a royal decree, and that we think you should make it a law of the Medes and Persians that cannot be revoked." I thought, okay, tell me more. What is this regulation that all of my people think is important enough to make happen right now? And so they continued. King Darius. Okay, it's a little less formal, a little more pushy, but okay. "We think that you should have a law that recognizes the gift, the lavish, wonderful gift of the king, that every person can worship and serve the gods of their choosing. They need to realize that it comes from your throne, that their freedom comes from their servitude to you. And so we think that you should make it's a ceremonial law, a symbolic law for just 30 days, that anyone who prays to any god or makes any petition to any man except for you, O king, for the next 30 days, we'll cast him into the den of lions." I thought, wow, this is quite the statute. Seems important. I mean, it does make sense. I am the man who has brought all of this kingdom together. I have overcome the peoples, the leaders, the gods of all of these regions. And so, under my authority, under my banner, for 30 days, that makes sense to do this. I wonder, maybe Daniel could write up a draft. It sounds like an important law that we should get the wording right. Where is Daniel? He's always missing this time of day. I don't know. Well, they said that everyone agrees, so I'm sure he's on board. And one of the satraps pulled out a document and said, "Here it is. Sign what's written. Here is the royal decree. Sign it and put your name on it so that it may not be changed according to the law of the Medes and the Persians." And so I, King Darius, I signed what was written, and I established the law that could not be changed. And that was a pretty good day's work. We got a lot accomplished today, signing royal decrees and all. So I decided that it was time for me to head back to my palace. I had some wine brought in. We had a party. There were women. I had a deep, dreamless sleep. I mean, I never had any problem sleeping anyway. But some nice diversions, they made it go well. All right, so a couple nights of like that. And then I was surprised one morning when the men, my two governors, came back into my room and said, "O king," wow, we're really getting informal at this point. "O king, didn't you establish a law that says that anyone who makes petition to any man or God except for you for 30 days will be cast into the den of lions?" I'm just kind of waking up and, yeah, it's established. It cannot be altered. It's what it is, right? What are you guys doing? Daniel gives you no regard, or the statute that you have put in place. Daniel, who is a exile of Judah, he doesn't give you proper regard. And he 3 times a day petitions his God. Another one of the satraps raised his hand and said, "Yes, he does. I told him about the law myself. He was going to pray, and he started up his stairs, and he went to pray anyway. And wait, what do you mean you told Daniel about the law? You told me that everyone agreed to this thing." Well, the satrap bowed and kind of disappeared back into the crowd. Another witness said, "Yeah, I've seen him. He's there every afternoon. He goes up to his room, he throws open the shutters, he raises his hands towards Jerusalem, and he prays for mercy. He prays for the nation of the Jews, not for the kingdom of Darius." And their treachery was complete. They had power over me, their king. They had convinced me and gotten me to sign this law. But I decided, I set my heart, I was going to deliver Daniel. And so I spent the entire day. I argued and I fought. I tried to sign other decrees. I sent the men out and I tried to figure it out in my throne room by myself. I brought other advisors. I did everything I could. But then the shadows started to get long. The sun dropped behind the horizon. The day came to an end. And my opportunity to rescue Daniel set. Just as the day ended, my governors came in, their shoulders back, self-satisfaction on their face. "O King Darius, you know that the law of the Medes and the Persians does not alter. So I gave the command. I gave the command that Daniel would be thrown into the den of lions. And so Daniel was brought in by military escort. He was leaning on his staff, still muttering prayers under his breath. The court became chaos. There were shouts and confusion and excitement. But Daniel, he was a rock. He was confident and at peace. And his confidence gave me an encouragement. And I just shouted out to Daniel, the God that you continually serve, he will deliver you. I don't even know where that came from, but and so the men who were in charge of our lions rolled out a stone. Now, our lions, Mediterranean lions, they're extinct now, but those things are beasts, behemoths. My excellent specimens pushed 10 feet long. They were almost 700 pounds, dark and tawny. And these men came and they rolled out a stone. They kicked Daniel down into the pit where the den was. They rolled the stone in front of the mouth of what was now his tomb. They put the wax before me, and with my signet, with my own hand, I sealed the stone. And the other lords also sealed the stone, to be sure that nothing should be changed about the purpose with which we were treating Daniel. What else could I do? And so I went back home to my palace, and I fasted for Daniel. Sleep fled from me. As the sun began to peak above the horizon, just at daybreak, I rushed to the den where Daniel was. There were already satraps. My governors were already there. They were talking about how quiet the den was. It seems that the lions were quite satisfied with their meal. The governors had brought their wives and their sons in the best patriotic garb. We're waiting to see who would replace Daniel's empty chair. Out of just desperation, I called out to Daniel. Daniel, has the God that you continually serve been able to save you? O King Darius, live forever. That's Daniel's voice. My God sent an angel to shut the lion's mouth so that they couldn't harm me, because I was found innocent before him. And before you, I have done no wrong. I mean, I could have jumped out of my skin. I was so amazed that Daniel's voice came from the den. He said he was just waiting for someone to throw down a rope and pull him up. He said he and the lions were hungry for breakfast. So we did. We pulled him up, and as he came to the mouth of the pit, it was like someone just released the lions right then. They were roaring so I could feel it in my chest. They were jumping to the top of the pit, slashing at the men with the ropes. I have never seen them so vicious and furious in my life. I was amazed until I was furious. And I looked over at those people who had betrayed me, who had conspired to make me and my chief advisor. Well, there's a pit. And apparently the lions are hungry. So I waved at my guards, and they corralled those conspirators, their wives and their sons, and they pushed them into the pit. Those people didn't even reach the bottom of the pit before the lions overcame them and crushed them. My enemies would not have any people from their families to come back against me again. I realized that with all my authority as king, that I could not save Daniel. With all the power of the empire, I couldn't change the law of the Medes and Persians. But Daniel's lawgiver could not be broken. Daniel couldn't be saved by my efforts to undo a bad law. But the God whose law he faithfully kept, he was able to deliver. Despite injustice, the living God, his dominion endures and ultimately delivers even if the stone is sealed to the tomb. Daniel wasn't delivered from the lion's den. Daniel was delivered by a God who went into the den with him. Because of Daniel's continual faithfulness, I was moved to praise the God who brings life, the living God. I wrote to all the peoples, nations, languages that dwelt on the earth, peace be multiplied to you. I made a decree that in all my royal dominion, that peoples will tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. And Daniel prospered in my land till the end of his days. If you will, open up with me to Daniel chapter 6. May God add his blessing to those who hear, who read, and do his word. Daniel chapter 6, verse 1. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps, to be over the whole kingdom, and over these 3 governors, whom Daniel was one, that the satraps might give account to them, so that the king would suffer no loss. Then this Daniel distinguished himself above the governors, the satraps, because an excellent spirit was found in him. And the king gave thought to setting him over the whole realm. So the governors and satraps sought to find some charge against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could find no charge or fault, because he was faithful. Nor was there any error or fault found in him. And these men said, "We shall not find a charge against Daniel unless we find it against him concerning the law of his God." So these governors and satraps thronged before the king and said thus to him, "King Darius, live forever. All the governors of the kingdom, the administrators and satraps, the counselors and advisors have consulted together to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree. Whoever petitions any god or man for 30 days, except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the decree, sign the writing, so that it cannot be changed, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which does not alter." Therefore King Darius signed the written decree. Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went home. And in his upper room, with his windows open towards Jerusalem, he knelt down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as was his custom since early days. Then these men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. And they went before the king and spoke concerning the king's decree. "Have you not signed a decree that every man who petitions any god or man within 30 days except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions? The king answered and said, the thing is true, according to the law of Medes and Persians, which does not alter. So they answered and said before the king, that Daniel, who is one of the captives from Judah, does not show due regard for you, O king, or for the decree that you have signed, but he makes his petition 3 times a day. And the king, when he heard these words, was greatly displeased with himself. He set his heart on Daniel to deliver him, and he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. Then these men approached the king and said to the king, know, O king, that it is the law of the Medes and Persians that no decree or statute which the king establishes may be changed. So the king gave the command, and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. But the king spoke to Daniel, saying, your God, whom you serve continually, will deliver you. The stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the signets of his lords, that the purpose concerning Daniel might not be changed. Now the king went into his palace and spent the night fasting, and no musicians were brought before him. Also his sleep went from him. When the king arose very early in the morning and went in haste to the den of lions, and when he came to the den, he cried out with a lamenting voice to Daniel. The king spoke, saying to Daniel, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions? Then Daniel said to the king, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel to shut the lions' mouths, so that they have not hurt me, because I was found innocent before him. And also, O king, I have done no wrong before you. Now the king was exceedingly glad for him, and commanded that they should take Daniel out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no injury whatever was found on him, because he believed in his God. And the king gave the command, and they brought those men who accused Daniel, and cast them into the den of lions, them, their children, and their wives. The lions overpowered them and broke all of their bones in pieces before they ever came to the bottom of the den. Then Darius wrote, to all peoples, nations, languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom, men must tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God and steadfast forever. His kingdom is the one which shall not be destroyed. His dominion shall endure to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. Who has delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. So Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. This morning we saw Daniel's public faithfulness to God was exploited against him. There was no escape. He demonstrated that God's faithful people express their devotion to him, even when the law schemes and the world schemes against us. When we sit in the lunchroom at work, God deserves our gratitude for the great things he's done in our lives. We can't change the cultural law that says don't bring up religion in public. Instead, we break it, and we face the consequences of telling those who don't know Jesus yet how wonderful he is. Daniel's story showed us that this will drop us into the lion's den. We'll face the fearful fallout of the world's calculated schemes. God will be in the midst of the lions with us. I don't know how he'll demonstrate his power for you, but he is a God who fights for his name in us. He'll prove to be the one whose dominion stands, whose kingdom endures. If we're facing the loss of some part of our life that we built with our kids in sports or community, we can't change the requirements of the organization our kids want to be a part of. But we also can't honor our God and agree to the anti-biblical concepts of inclusion and tolerance the way that they present them. We might have to endure a painful disappointment with our kids with our spouses or our friends. But God works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. So maybe he'll use this as an opportunity maybe the time will be a chance for more intentional discipleship with the kids. Maybe it will teach them that there are things that are worth standing for. Maybe it will inspire others to see that God is worthy of honor and obedience and choose to follow him with their own lives. We can't change the perception of many professions that the church should be divorced from public life and that expressions of faith violate public conduct. Yet our presence in the public sphere is only valuable it only has eternal value when our devotion is expressed. Our prayers, our encouragements, our warnings, our hopes, these are all gifts to those who don't yet know Jesus. They may bring a heavy cost, but God will vindicate his name. And as King Darius figured out, God is the one who's living. The living God, steadfast forever. His dominion shall endure to the end. We can demonstrate devotion to Jesus when we demonstrate our devotion to Christ despite the world's schemes. God goes into the pit with us, and he vindicates his name. Father God, I just want to thank you for Daniel's testimony, his faithfulness, that he wrote and of his adventure with you. He wrote of the things that you did in his life so that we would have a testimony to what it means to be faithful to our God and King.